You have built something real, but somewhere along the way, you decided you had to carry it alone. And today's guest, Valerie Bowden, backpacked 13 countries across Africa with nothing. And what she learned about letting people carry the weight with you will change how you build your life, how you build your business, and how you build your team. And so I'm excited to get into this one. And if this episode moves you, supports you, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. So let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George show. I know I say this often, but I also have a new best friend because we share a lot of commonalities and life experiences that we were bonding over. And so I haven't asked her permission, but I called us friends. And so, like I typically do, I'm publicly bullying her into saying yes. But I'm excited to be joined by today's guest. And so I want to welcome officially Valerie to the show. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Thank you so much. And no, I'm really excited to be here. We do have a lot of common experiences. So I think we can be besties.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
Mhm.
Plus, some of my favorite food is where also you live. I'm a foodie. I'm fat on the inside, but no longer on the outside. So I still like bond over food.
Yes. And we've been to the same restaurant in Kenya even and had
In
similar
Kenya, I
things.
know.
Yeah. Shout out to the carnivore restaurant. So no, we share a lot of things in common.
And I feel like for anybody listening, this is so off brand. I never talk about this, but if you happen to be going to Nairobi at
Mhm.
any time in the next 5 to 10 years, I promise you this restaurant is still there, but you have to try it. It is called Carnivores. It is a life altering experience. The food is incredible, but you get to choose how stretchy you get when you eat. And both of us have eaten there. So we were talking about it before the show.
Yes, you'll have meat that you didn't even know you could eat,
Mhm.
from ostrich burgers, camel,
Yep.
game, some unmentionables I won't say on the show, but it's a wild experience and definitely delicious.
It is. And I will say the shocking thing, the two things that I remember it vividly. I loved the camel and I
Mm.
did not like the alligator or crocodile,
Oh,
whatever that was.
it's very tough. Yeah, I
It
agree.
was it was like the jaw workout. And then I was like, I can't do this. This is like give me fat on a ribeye or give me something else. Like this is not it for me.
Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Good tips. Yeah, that's like that would be the takeaway from this episode is
Yeah.
go to Kenya and try this restaurant, if nothing else.
Look at you with like the perfect segue because I was going to ask you because I'm excited and I'll for everybody listening, I will share her background in a minute. But you have a lot of life experience. You also have a lot of business experience and you're in the world of helping entrepreneurs. But, for anybody listening, like what do you think that they could expect to change in their life or to learn if they were to actually apply some of the things that you're going to share from your specialty and experience, like in their life or in their business?
I would say for anyone listening, you're definitely going to hear a lot of different perspectives about the African continent. It's where I spent a decade of my life. So I'm hoping that after this episode, you want to travel there if possible. And if not, if you're an entrepreneur who wants to hire offshore team members, but you're like, I don't know how to do that, I have so many practical tips on how you can make offshore team members really work for your business. And so those are the two takeaways. Either you're going to improve your business or you're going to travel somewhere awesome.
I love it. No, those are great ones. It also gives me a really easy vein to make sure we hit both topics on the show. And so for everybody listening, I gotta give her a little bit of her flowers before we even begin. And I'm gonna start with the personal ones that I already know. Like backpacked through Africa, is an incredible wife, an incredible mother, lived in Ethiopia, which is one of my
Mhm.
favorite countries I've ever visited for 8 years, right?
Mhm. Yep, 8
eight
years.
years. Okay. Literally one of NBC's top 30 rising women, founded an incredible company called Cradle, which I'm going to have to ask you to
Mhm.
explain that in a little bit while. You have it's an award-winning outsourcing agency that helps with hiring and not ones that are let me be careful with my words. Um, with incredible people with incredible values that do
Mhm.
incredible work, even though they're offshore. And
Yes.
so you've basically become a fierce advocate for what most people overlook. Africa being one of them, but there are so many incredibly skill driven and educated people there. And you basically now help US companies connect with this high performing talent and build and scale their business while having an impact, and which I also know has an impact on them locally. And
Mhm.
so I think the rest of it we'll get into, but that's just kind of an overview. You've got how many team members do you have?
Over 130 now
Okay.
in just 3 years.
Okay. So, yeah, so we'll say that like you have some experience in the entrepreneur game. You got cradle
Mhm.
dialed, you have all these things. And so I'm kind of excited to dive in. And so the first thing I want to ask you, because I asked you this before, why did you name your company Cradle?
Great question. It's because Africa is the cradle of humanity. And I did not want to have one of those company names that would like empower Africa or help Africa or anything that I've kind of seen because I really wanted to highlight like this is the coolest continent. Like this is where so many talented professionals are and just like how Africa is known for being, the birthplace of civilization, we hope that we can kind of be the start into your offshore journey and make it such a success.
Mm. Okay, so I'm you know what? We're gonna start with the personal side. We're gonna start with the
Okay.
personal side. This just feels right to me.
Mhm.
I can't imagine the life lessons learned backpacking through a foreign country, for however long. What
Mhm.
was it? What is it? 13, 14 countries through Africa?
Yeah. It took me 7 months and 9 days. I did the Cape to Cairo route, and it took me through 13 African countries.
Okay, so I wanna start there because I'm just so innately curious. Like, what
Mhm.
are some of like the biggest lessons you learned or takeaways that you learned doing that, both on the journey, but also like taking those back and applying them to like life into business?
Yeah, I've learned so much from that trip that I still use today. A few things that stand out are at that time I was 25 and I wanted to see Africa, didn't have any money after grad school, so I could only backpack with a tent and everybody was against this trip. I mean, like there was really no one who was super supportive because most people were really worried about me, but I just felt in my heart like this is where I need to be. Like this something about this trip feels so divine and it's meant to be. And so I took a one-way flight to South Africa and I think one lesson I learned is like you have to really be dialed in to like your inner voice or to God and what you should be doing and kind of ignore the critics because now all of those people who are so against that trip, I mean, they talk about it all the time and they're so happy for me now. But at that time I didn't have a lot of support. So it definitely taught me to like lean into my own wisdom and follow what I know I should be doing for my life. And then another thing I learned, like if you've never been to Africa, you might not know that it's actually really hard to plan your trip. So for example, if I was traveling in the US, I could plan every single detail and even know what I was ordering at every single restaurant before I like even left my house. But when it comes to backpacking Africa, especially at that time, like 10 years ago, there was nothing online. Like I had no idea even how to backpack. So I just would go to the city, ask somebody at the bus stop how to get to the next city, and they would tell me which bus to get on. And then when I got there, that's when I could figure out where I was going to sleep and where I could eat and all of that stuff. And it really taught me like you might have a vision of what to do, but you can't always plan it out. And you really have to just take that step of faith and trust that it's going to work out. And it did. And it's helped me now, even with business. Sometimes there's like, I don't know exactly how to do it. And it's like, you know what? I don't have to have everything planned out. I just have to take the next step and then the next step after that. And then that's kind of how I've learned to go about doing business when sometimes you're making decisions that are really unknown.
Mm. I
Yeah,
love that one. Those are very, very powerful business practices. And
mhm,
I was like, it's surrender and trust, right? Because there's some
exactly.
degree of like keep moving forward, but move forward on the piece in front of you because that typically leads to what's next, right? And
Exactly.
all too often, yeah.
Yeah, and I learned, like, the parts that I try to white knuckle on that trip and also in business never work out well. So, when I first, arrived in South Africa, I was like, "I'm gonna travel fast." So I'm like this typical American girl, like, "It'll probably take me, like, 6 weeks," right? Like, I didn't know. And so in the beginning, I actually missed a lot of really cool experiences because I was so stuck on, like, "Okay, I have to probably get to Mozambique by this date, and then I have to go to the next country by that date." And I miss so many cool things. And it's kind of like the same thing in business. Like you might even have an idea of where you should go and you're like going after it and nothing's lining up, but you're just going to make it happen. And instead, if you just really slow down and you're like, actually, there might be a better way, a different way of doing this, like you're going to have so much of a better time and the journey along the way will be a lot better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I'm probably leading this because I have an experience of, basically
Mhm.
I was deployed to Somalia, but traveled through most of Northern Africa. I'm curious what some of like the perspectives or values or things that you learned through the incredible humans in Africa
Wow.
that like you brought back because it's such a contrast to American culture, but also I feel like if I could take a set of values and say, if this is how you ran your life in business every day, you would win following how life is lived over there in our world. And so I'm curious, like, what you learned in that process.
Exactly. I definitely feel like I'm a better human being because of what I've learned from some of those cultures I got to spend time in. The first is just like the just going out of your way to help somebody. So, as an example, one time I remember in Ethiopia, I was walking during the rainy season and I had sandals on, and there's just so much mud. I'm just like caked in mud. And it was so bad. And this girl came out and gave me her tennis shoes, and she made me put my muddy feet into her tennis shoes while she carried my muddy sandals back to where I was saying. And then at the end, she's like, you can just keep these shoes. Like, I know you need them, and have a good rest of your day. And she wanted like nothing from me, but she literally gave me her pair of her shoes. And so just like in life and even in business, like just learning to go that extra mile and just to like help someone more than you even have to, I think has been something that stayed with me. And yeah, I think just the valuing relationships is something I've learned more, especially in Ethiopia. Like if you need help or anything, like you're in the right spot. Like somebody will always be there to help you. And even now, I live in Pittsburgh, and you see that if you need help with anything, like I'm gonna call one of my Ethiopian friends first before my like American friends. And it's like this just value of showing up and being there for each other. And that's something like I've tried to incorporate more into my life.
Yeah, doing more than what you have to with expecting
Mhm.
nothing in return, which was
Mhm.
I experienced that in Africa. Like this was when I was a Marine before I was ever an entrepreneur, but it's like I'm thinking back and reflecting in this conversation, like as young as 5, as
Mhm.
old as like 80, the same kind of value where it's like people first, people first, people first. And
Mhm.
it's such a profound concept. And I love that like you live here now and you're like, I'm gonna call my Ethiopian friends first. Right. And it's
100%.
it's so ironic because when we think about like what makes businesses successful, whether it's team or whether it's customers, it's actually like embodying that value. It's having
Mm.
people feel seen, having people feel heard, having people feel respected, like taking the transactions off the table. But it gets lost in the world of consumerism and speed all the time.
Yes. I think that's what I've seen the difference is maybe Americans as a whole might value time a little bit more. And so I remember when I was after my backpacking trip, I lived in Ethiopia for 8 years. And when I first got my first job, I remember I would just be rushing in at 9 a.m. so I could sit down and start my work exactly at 9. And pretty soon I realized I was alienating myself because what I needed to do is stop and say hello to everybody and have a small conversation. And how is your mom? And how is your grandma? And how is your daughter? Right. And you have to do that with everybody. And it meant I was starting work at 9:30, but then the relationship was so much stronger and how we could work together was better because I actually knew who they were as people. And so now even with my company, like sometimes I have to slow down and a stand up will happen. I just want to rush into like what we have to do next. And then I've learned to be like, I need to pause and ask everybody how they did and like how are you actually doing, like for real. And just making sure I prioritize relationships first.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanna say this to everybody listening or watching this too. If you didn't catch any of this, there's already been like 7 or 8 values that are inval invaluable when it comes to like living or running your business because the other thing that happens and I think that that's a great place to dive into this is when you slow down, it also means that when people are emotionally bought in and feel seen,
Mhm.
their time collapses and how quickly they get things done. And so a lot of people, and I see this all the time when you get stuck in the action trap, as my friend Jessica says, you're like, do. Things take so much longer in there because people feel so disconnected from either the people they're working
Mhm.
with or the things that they're doing. But it's counterintuitive to like check in and get
Yeah.
connected. But when you do, it actually collapses time and it makes the things that you're trying to accomplish go a lot smoother and faster.
Exactly. Because if you think about it, I mean, your business probably isn't so special, and I know no one wants to hear that, but there's probably like 100, if not 1,000 other companies offering the same service. So people actually want to work with you specifically. So you do have to spend that time to get to know them and see if it's a good fit. And what I found in business over the past 3 years is I'm to the point where I just want to work with good people. I don't care if you're a small business or a big business, but we just want to work with people who share same values and that are enjoyable to work with. And so yeah, just spending that time on that relationship will really, I think, improve things for the business community.
Oh, for sure. So I'm curious too. So like timeline wise, like you backpacked, you lived in Ethiopia for 8 years. Like, what was the moment when you were like, I need to start this business or I need to do
Mhm.
this? Or like, what was the like aha moment that like led to all of this?
Yeah, it kind of unfolded over time, because my background was actually in social work. So I thought I would
Okay.
do charities and nonprofits. And there are some great ones in Africa, but there are also horrible ones. And during my time, I happened to see a lot more of the horrible ones, the ones that, maybe my church sponsored, my grandma sent money to. But when you actually saw them on the ground, they were so disappointing. And I got to the part where I was like, I know there's some great nonprofits, but like the rest of the nonprofit scene is so bad. I don't even want to be affiliated with this industry at this moment. Like it just felt so corrupt and gross to me at some point. So, and I realized like people actually just need jobs. Like you don't actually, they don't want your old donated clothes or your shoe boxes at Christmas. Like they just want a job and to be able to take care of their family themselves. And so that got me really passionate about job creation in Africa. And that led me to working for an outsourcing company. And at that time, I had no idea that American companies were building offshore teams in Africa because I thought India, Philippines, maybe like Latin America, but I did not know that like these large Fortune 500 companies were building, teams thousands big of customer service reps, sales reps, developers in places like Ethiopia or Zimbabwe or Kenya. And so I started working for this company, and immediately it felt like this is the win win that I was looking for. Like Americans were really happy with the quality and the accent and the performance. And we were creating jobs overnight. Maybe a request would come in for like 20 more people to the call center. That's 20 more jobs we were creating overnight. So to me, I was like, this is such a win win. And then after doing that for a few years, I realized, okay, well, actually, the Ethiopians are getting paid like 50 cents an hour by these big companies. And these big companies do not know these team members. They don't care about them. They're literally just a seat number. And we were under NDAs, so we couldn't even like publicly acknowledge that they had team members in Ethiopia. And that was like, oh, this is still a little bit queasy to me. Like this is close, but not quite right. So during that time, my husband and I, for other reasons, just moved back to the US. And I was 8 months pregnant with our second child. And I just was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to create my own company that does it right. And so that was the idea of like, okay, let's start Cradle and let's only outsource to Africa because I love the social impact of that. But let's do it the right way. And that's kind of how everything started.
Mm, I love that, and I love the why behind it as well.
Mhm.
Because I think it's hard for even people here to understand how different it is there in like every
Mhm.
degree to like, things that we take for granted, but like how far $10 goes or
Right.
$20 goes or
Mhm.
it's I think living it and seeing it firsthand is drastically different because it's also not consumerism over there. It's just basic needs, right?
Yeah.
And they want opportunity. And to reiterate this point over and over, like some of the most humble, giving, loving, intelligent, hardworking people that I've ever met in my life. And actually, ironic, last week at my church, my pastor brought in a guest, and he's the founder of Charity Water.
Oh, cool. Mhm.
And he has the same vision of like, I started a nonprofit after this life of debauchery because I didn't realize how most nonprofits didn't actually care about the mission and they were skimming money and XYZ. And he's like, so 100% of their donations go to giving water to people, but they can track every dollar. So if you give like $3, you can see to like the person in Zambia or in X country, like what it did and how it did
Mhm.
it. But I remember because he was talking about this explicitly in all the videos they showed. Another thing that he shared, and I'm just sharing this so everybody like understands, like education's a big problem in Africa as well, but it's not because of a lack of desire, it's because of a lack of time. So they shared this story of a 13-year-old girl, and she wants to go to school, but every morning she has to walk 6 hours to collect
Oh,
brackish water that makes them sick. And so to support her family, she has to walk 6 hours in the morning and then 6 hours in the evening
mhm,
to get water that's causing all these health issues. And there's just not time. And so
mhm.
the concept of like having a job and being able to give them resources, it changes things on so many levels. So I love it. I'm so grateful that you started it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I think is so exciting. Like right now we hire a lot from capital cities where it's almost the opposite end where there's been so much education in capital cities that there's so many college grads that just don't have jobs.
Yeah.
But if you look at like what's happened in the Philippines where it was like a smaller country and there's so much outsourcing there that now they are going to rural areas to try and get more people. So I hope that's kind of what outsourcing can do in Africa is like first we hire all these college grads in the capital cities who don't have jobs but are so well qualified and then eventually, hopefully, that becomes a harder and harder to do. So it forces more organizations and more training companies to go more rural areas. And you're right, like there are girls who then just don't have access to it. And maybe this can start paving the way when there's also like a demand for it on the business side as well.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know why my heart just felt like sharing that because I was bawling
Yeah.
my eyes out when I watched
Mhm.
that video, and I was like, I changed my vision, and I called one of my business partners, like, "Hey, you wanna go to Africa and, like, fund a well or 2 or 10?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Done." And I was like,
Oh,
"Cool." Like, it felt like it literally happened last week, and then I have you on the podcast today. I'm like, "Africa, Africa." I'm like, "All right,
fun.
Mother Africa, heard. Like, I will come back. I will come visit." So I
So
wanna get
cool.
I wanna get a little bit tactical real quick because I think there's a lot of maybe myths or misunderstandings about, like, hiring offshore because,
Mhm.
people either have good or bad experiences, but, like, what are some of the things that you face all the time as, like, why people wouldn't wanna work with Cradle or wouldn't wanna hire somebody in Africa?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, most everyone has a bad experience, whether it's just you called a call center and you couldn't understand what that person was saying and you didn't get the help you needed, or you've hired offshore before and it was like a total disaster. We always say like we collect people with like PTSD from from outsourcing. And I think what people have to know is if you've had a bad experience, it's actually very little on the person who was probably doing the work. It probably has a lot more to do with the outsourcing agency you were doing, how well were they actually qualifying people, how well were these people trained and onboarded, and what kind of support was given to them. So I think like one myth is just to know that like you can outsource and it can be very successful and very streamlined if you set it up the proper way. And I think another thing is a lot of people will come to me saying like, "Well, I really do care about American jobs as well, and I don't want to take jobs away from Americans." And I always say like, it's actually not taking jobs away from Americans because probably as a small business owner, you wouldn't be able to hire someone, like, you wouldn't be able to afford someone in the US, and so you just end up doing it yourself, and because of that, your business can't grow as fast. So if you can hire someone for, like, $9 an hour who can cold call and fill your pipeline, then those calls can go to you or your sales team, which actually then, like, creates the demand for you to hire more people internally, and locally. And so, yeah, done right, like outsourcing should help your business increase jobs in the US, create some awesome jobs overseas for well qualified individuals and support your customers better. So like that's what we strive for and that's what I think every business owner should know.
Yeah, and this might be a little repetitive, but maybe I'm trying to be a little bit specific with this too because I think when it when it comes to this question, which is like, what are the mistakes that you see people make when they're trying to hire
Mhm.
offshore? I also think the answer is dual pronged to where they also apply to everybody hiring anybody, even if it's not offshore. And so
Mhm.
I'm just curious because you own the agency, right? So you see this all the time. You hear every war story, you hear every PTSD,
Yeah.
you hear every trauma, good, bad, the ugly. And so I'm just curious, like if you could synthesize it down, what are some of those things? Because you talked about, if you do it right, right? So I'm
Mhm.
curious, like what are all the ways that people do it wrong? So then we can talk about like what it looks like to do it right.
Yes, I see so many wrong things. I would say for us, like, first of all, I would say you should always interview and choose your own team members. I know other outsourcing companies just kind of like give you people and then they might not be the right people. So we're really big about like, let's set up an interview and then you can choose the person that you think is actually going to like resonate with your clients or your potential prospects. But the biggest thing I think is actually training and onboarding. And so here's an example. We had a client who hired 3 cold callers from us. He's never had cold callers before. He hired 3, and he spent 1 hour every day with them for 6 weeks, training them, after their calls. How did it go? Let's role play. Let's figure this out. After 6 weeks, they had generated an additional $100,000 in closed revenue for him after 6
Mm,
weeks, right? But it was because he literally spent an hour a day with them. We have other clients who on the second day or even the first day, they're like, here's your list, here's your script, good luck. And the cold callers are like, wait, how do I say your business name again? And like, what do I say when somebody says this? And they're totally freaked out. And it takes them so much longer to get results. And it really just comes down to like that common sense. Like they might be cold callers and they might be good at calling people, but they still don't know your industry or the nuances of your particular business. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like put them through a couple of weeks of onboarding and training, let them see the whole process, do daily stand-ups for the first 90 days until you really know that they feel comfortable. And then they perform so well. But yeah, lack of training, I think, is like the number one biggest mistake that business owners don't do right.
yeah, oh, for sure. And that training is not also just in skill set, it's in culture and
Mhm.
values.
Yes. Yep.
And it's even going all the way back to when you talked about like checking in, like the people on your team and how they feel and
Mhm.
having that care and that consideration to lean into them also means that like you have to also train them and teach them on like your values and what you embody and what you believe in way
Yeah.
deeper than just their skills.
Exactly, because you don't also know what their last client enforced upon them. So as
Yeah.
another example, we had a client and, they were like, "Okay, this person is like they almost sound like a robot." Like they paid attention so well to the script that they said it sounds like AI calling, but it's a real person, right? And when we checked in, it was like at their last job, they would get fired if they did not read everything word by word, and including words that as a native English speaker, I was like, "I can't even say this right. Like this is not an easy word." Right? But like they were going to get fired if they didn't say it correctly. So they move on to this new client thinking that they're doing everything right. And instead, this client values relationships and personalization more. And so it really had to be like, here are the 4 things you have to say and get right for compliance purposes and just general qualifications. But everything else, say it in your own words. And the more conversational you are, the more you can get that person to smile or laugh on the phone. Like that's how we're judging you. And then after
Mhm.
that, that person did amazing. But it was like giving them permission and teaching them, like you said, like these are the values of my company. And this is what that actually means when you're doing the work.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I also because you mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important. Like if you're listening to this and you have a team or you're hiring a team member, whether it's offshore or in the US, you also have to remember that they come with previous experience.
Mhm.
They come with what I call residue, right?
Mm.
And there's not this like flick switch of like, oh, they get it, they're here, right? It's like for all our parents listening, because we're both parents,
Mhm.
it requires like consistency and conditioning and
Yeah.
compassion to like teach something and to do that. And I think it's fair to say like the depth of which you invest in your team is directly correlated to the depth of the results that you get.
100%. And that's why sometimes I feel like larger clients end up getting better results because they usually have like a dedicated like SDR manager, like a sales manager that their only job is to make this offshore team successful. But even if you are a smaller business or an entrepreneur, like you can still mimic that. You just have to give your attention to being like, my job is to make this team successful and really being there for them. And then it's like an investment. It totally pays off. But those first 90 days, you have to put the work in.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel called to ask this because you've talked about like closers and a few things. Like who can like what's the person that can hire like let's say they use Cradle and hire somebody in Africa, right?
Mhm.
Like what are the skill sets? What are the areas? And then like who can't?
Great question. I mean, for us personally, we provide like virtual assistants, customer service reps, sales reps, and developers, but sales is probably what we do best. And that's
Mm,
because some of the accents coming out of the countries we hire are so good. Like they can sound straight up American, which is why we kind of specialize in sales. So for us personally, we always just say like we want someone who can hire a full-time rep. And the reason why we do that is because when we first started off, we would take smaller clients and then our talent, like our team members would have like 5 clients. And it's like, well, how well can they really do the job when they have to know all these different things about 5 different clients? So eventually we just said, like, we want to work with companies who can hire one full-time rep because we want them to be dedicated and really part of your team. So that's personally how we run it. But I think every agency works differently. But I would say, like, you definitely, when you hire someone offshore, wherever that is, you want someone who's dedicated because the more clients they have, the less quality you're probably going to get.
Yeah, and are there, like, any skill sets that you recommend, like, not taking offshore?
Um, I would say in general, what we've seen is like most companies use a little bit of AI, a little bit of outsourcing, and a little bit of like American employees. And so it's figuring out of those three who does what. And
Mm,
so generally, like AI is like that first, maybe like that first touch point, right? Like you go on to like, you need a customer service rep. So first you talk with the chatbot, and then the chatbot doesn't know what you're saying. So you say agent, right? And then you usually get to like an outsourced team member who can do like, we'd say like tier one, right? So it's either like those easier customer service problems or maybe like that general outreach where you're like, we need someone to make 300 cold calls every day, right? Like that's a perfect outsourced person. And then when it comes to maybe either like closing or someone who really needs to know more nuances about your industry and your customers, then maybe you do want someone who's like based in the US because maybe they've been doing it for a longer and they just have like a general better understanding since they actually are locally based. So yeah, so
mm.
I think there's probably every company has things to outsource, but you have to look at like what can you train and delegate on, and like what actually requires maybe someone to know more information about this.
Yeah,
Um,
I also
yeah.
find too, because this is potentially, I mean, I know it's the same whether you're hiring offshore or hiring too. It's also a massive magnifying glass for the
Mhm.
lack of process that exists already.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I've found this interestingly enough, because I've coached thousands of people now, and I've been in every bucket of every country of every outsourcing, US, not,
Mhm.
that when you work with somebody like an agency like yours or even like somebody remote, their presence almost forces you to look at your process because they need it to succeed. Where
Mhm.
like hiring in the US, they're like, I'll just check the boxes that you give me. Like I'll do what you want, but there's not this
Yeah.
like desire for improvement or efficiency. It's kind of this
Mhm.
like baked in benefit that comes when you have like an offshore team or something. Like I know for me, like from podcast editing, and I like one of my permanent employees came from the Philippines, but he started
Oh.
through an agency. But then he's like telling me, like, no, no, you suck at this. Like, you need to do this different. Like, you need to hit this timeline. Like, that's not the most. And I was like, I was a little butthurt and also extremely grateful at the same time because like we still use that process to this day.
So funny. But that is actually so true. And that's probably something I should have mentioned in like my best tips, which is like don't bring your offshore team members into chaos. Like
Yes.
you do need like a clear job description and like a clear like SOP on how to do things because you're right. Like especially with them not being like physically in the same location, it's not like they can just you can talk as much casually. Like you do need to have like a set of like this is what needs to be done. This is how you do it. This is when. And then it's amazing what can be done. So I always tell people like if you can have an SOP done before, amazing. I am not that organized. And so what I do is whenever I hire internally, I just do like a Zoom like 9 to 5, like we are on a Zoom call for 8 hours today. And then you're just going to watch how I do it. You're going to type up your own SOP. I will review it to make sure we didn't miss anything or tweak anything. And like, that's how I train you.
Mhm.
Probably not as good, but it's effective for people who don't have time to like make SOPs beforehand.
Yeah, I actually think your way is better. And if you heard a jump cut in this, it's because we had some technical difficulties in Pittsburgh. So I'm repeating this answer, but if there was a weird transition, that's why. I'm just calling it out right now. And now I get to be more succinct with what I said. But I think that your way is better because I use food all the time and I talk about, if I hand somebody ingredients, I tell them I want cookies. I want the cookie at the end. I don't care what process you went through to make that cookie. Right.
Mm.
And the way that you do it, it allows individuality, but also for somebody to play to their own strengths instead of trying to fit into a box. And so if you protect the outcome and you allow them to build the process, and then you make sure that everything fits within the bucket, I find that you actually get way better processes and you get way more efficiency in it.
I agree. Two follow-ups on that is one, most like of my team members are younger than me. And so they automatically figure out how to do something with AI way faster than I actually did, right? I'm not even that old, but they're like 23, 24. They're like all up on the AI trends. And so like that is the benefit of also outsourcing is you're probably outsourcing to a younger person who's way more up on how to do things more efficient. And the second thing I also like about, I guess, this last method is if you just send over a Loom video, you're just teaching them how to do that one thing, but you don't really train their mindset. So if they get to know who you are and you're spending that time, when something comes up, they can actually use their brain and critically think and be like, oh, this is how Valerie would want me to do it. And they don't learn that about when you just send over a Loom video, right? So like the more they get to know me, I say all these like extra little tidbits. I really help them do a better job in the end. So yeah, it's again, it's investing into that relationship, and then that's when you get good performance.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think you made a very valid point that I don't want anybody to miss either, is that you're not, and this doesn't it doesn't matter if you have one employee and that employee is a part-time
Mhm.
virtual assistant. It doesn't matter if you have 2 and they're just podcast and video editors. Like, it's the same thing. Like, you don't hire them to be robots. You actually want their brain and you want their
Mhm.
strength. But I say this to clients all the time. No one can read your mind. And
Mhm.
when you actually invest the time, I find that this is challenging for some people, but being a parent makes it really easy because when you're teaching an 8-year-old how to do something, you almost have to remove the filter from your thoughts to your mouth and let your thinking come out loud. And you're like, well, I'm doing this because of this, and here's why I do this, and
Mhm.
XYZ. But when you can do that, and this applies even if you have a current team member, by the way, just to tie this in, if you're training them and you're like, oh, they're not getting it, it's because we need to break the wall between like how we see it and how we think about it and share that with them so that they can pick up that perspective and ask questions about it so that they have the tools needed to think through that process when you're
Mhm.
not there.
Yes, exactly, and making like you said, making it like a safe environment so they know that questions are welcome. Like, this is our value is that, like, there's no stupid questions, so we want
Mhm.
you to ask questions. I want you to ask me 3 questions at least every single day for the next month, and then once you're open to that, like, that's when, again, you get those, like, results. So, I think it's common sense. I think just people forget about that, and they realize that, like, the way you'd like, as you mentioned, train your kids or train like, an American team member, you have to do the same for offshore team members too, if not a little bit more because you're not physically in the same location.
Mhm. Now I'm gonna give you a wide open question because at the beginning, when you share what people could take away, we covered the personal side, and you're like, I have some tips and I have some tricks and I have some things to think about. Can you just like take us to school with like any tips, tricks, anything you have that's like floating around in that like genius brain of yours?
Yeah. I mean, I always love to just tell my own story a little bit in what I learned. When I decided to backpack Africa, it was not a convenient time. I missed weddings, I missed things I wanted to go to, like nothing really lined up right. When I decided to start Cradle, I was again like 8 months pregnant. Not an ideal time to start a business. Let me just say that. And so I think what like one tip and trick I've learned is like there is no good timing and you just have to make things work. So if you're like, look, I really need some SDRs and I really need a VA, but like I don't have time to train them, you're never going to have time to train them. Like you just have to make the timing work if you know like this is what you need to do to grow your business. So like that's just one tip. Like just go for it if you need it. Timing doesn't work out. Um and I think the second thing is yeah, I mean, just again, knowing that like you can have quality outsourcing. I think that's just something that people don't know. And like I'm obviously biased towards Africa, but even if it's like Philippines or Latin America, like I see this so much that it's just really often a bad setup. What most people don't know is in the outsourcing world, there's a lot of middlemen. And so what happens is like you outsource to someone and that company actually is outsourcing to someone else and that one's actually outsourcing. So like the people who are actually getting doing the work aren't making the money and there's like a removal of connection and so you don't get the results you want. So just making sure that like wherever you outsource, if you're actually going direct, like through an agency who's hiring them directly and you're putting that time in and you're picking that person and you're managing them correctly, like you are going to get good results. So don't be afraid to outsource just because other people have done it incorrectly in the past.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really good. I love those tips. And I also think there's a point that all of us can remember no matter where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. And maybe if you're even starting as an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
something in your life where you didn't have all the pieces, the timing wasn't right, but you started it anyways, and you're looking back and now you're living in that dream. We forget
Uh-huh.
that visions are built goals are built like bite by bite, and a lot of the times the first bite is what unlocks the clarity for the next one. Like, I love
Yeah.
hearing that story of yours. Like, I had somebody else on the podcast, and she was 8 months pregnant, ended up in the NICU, and
Mm.
in the NICU, realized because her daughter is biracial that there wasn't representation for her daughter in Target when she walked around Target as she was walking
Mm.
while the baby was in the NICU. And so she's like, had this idea, and God's like, you're going to make it. So she sent a cold email to Target, and 2 weeks later had a purchase order for 400 stores and like $1.2 million in inventory. She hadn't made yet, as she has a child in the NICU post pregnancy, and now it's
Wow.
been all over the place. So like, I love hearing stories like that too.
Yeah.
To some degree, like, if now's not the right time, then when is? Like, what evidence are you trying to collect that's going to
Mhm.
somehow magically make you start the race? And what I've learned in my own life experience is that the only evidence I ever end up with is regret, and regret that I didn't
Mhm.
start when I initially had the idea.
Exactly, and, like, in that story you just shared, it's such a good example of, like, just following your gut. Like, I don't think anybody else would be like, how are you gonna reach Target? Come on." Like, that's not even possible, like, you need to be focusing on other things, but she probably had that, like, that idea that came to her, and she followed through with it. So, like, that's also, like, when you have that idea, like, that's a sign you should be doing it, and so just go for it.
Yeah, there's, I think the author who wrote, Eat, Pray, Love,
Mhm.
Elizabeth Gilbert, she has
Mhm.
another book called Big Magic, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
and because you talked about intuition, for me, it's God, it's Jesus, right? Like, I pray
Mhm.
enough and something hits me, and it hits me like a ton of bricks, so where I'm like, I can't
Mhm.
get it out of my brain, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll go do that thing." But she talks about this concept in the book, and I think it's a really good way to tie in what you just said about, like, trusting your intuition. But she talks about big magic of, like, ideas, whatever your
Mhm.
beliefs are floating around in the universe, and they're looking for an active participant to pick up the phone. But if
Mm.
you say no, that idea moves on to somebody else who's willing to pick up the phone. You might have been the first recipient, but you passed on it. And she tells this story because, ironically, actually, I'm seeing all this come together now. If I remember correctly, she was writing this really detailed, niche down story about a girl in Africa. And she was really stuck on it, like, had delayed it like 6 months. And so she kind of just shelved it, ended up writing another book, and ended up at a conference and saw one of her friends a couple years later who had just published a book, and she gave her a copy of it. And the book was about this same girl, same circumstances, same story. And she wrote the book, and she talks about, like, it wasn't mine to bring to life. But I think there's so many moments of that where, I tell everybody, like, when you wake up in the morning, whatever time you wake up, you aren't like, "Hey, at 2:31 PM today when I'm driving in the car,
Mhm.
install this thought into my brain."
Mhm.
Like, there's a reason it's coming up, and I've learned that when I pick up the phone, I don't really ever lose, right? Or the amount of times you might be thinking there
Yeah.
on your couch like, "Oh, I should text Valerie." And then you
Yeah.
do, and Valerie's like, "How'd you know I was thinking about you?" Like, "Oh, you came across my heart." But then the times
Mhm.
that you don't, I think about all those times that I don't. And I try to live in this, like, yes world all the time for my prayer. I'm like, if it pops up, if it's an idea, it's worth me trying and turning over that stone.
It's so funny that you mentioned her because I just finished her latest book last night. Like, I was up reading it, and she also shares in that one, like, you have, 30 seconds to save your life, and it's also about, like, making the right decision, like, immediately, because if you let it sink too long, you're gonna end up making the wrong decision, and so, like, kind of exactly what you said, like, when that thought comes, you got 30 seconds, do it. Send that email, send that text, because there's a reason for it.
Well, how ironic and coincidental, which is further
What
proves
we're
my
talking
point of
about.
what I
Yeah.
just said.
It's a
And
sign for
now
everyone listening.
and now I know she has a new book, and I'm gonna buy it later.
It's, yeah. No, it's, yeah, I've learned a lot from her. So, yeah, hopefully for, like, anybody out there who's, like, an entrepreneur or business owner listening to this, it's like, take that guidance, put it into practice immediately, and then just trust that the next step will open up for you, as you go along. There's an Ethiopian proverb that I really like, and it says, like, "Little by little, the chicken grows legs." And it's like, Like, yes, exactly, like or like the egg grows legs. So eventually, like, it's just you do one thing at a time and that consistency pays off, and then eventually you're walking.
One last question before we kind of start to land this
Mhm.
plane to respect time, but is your entire team in Africa?
Yeah. Mhm. And I'm very intentional about that because I always say, like, I am the biggest success story of why you should hire from Africa. All of my team members are on the continent. And in 3 years, like, as a mom, like, working a very much, like, daycare schedule, like, we hit our seven-figure, revenue, without any investment or grants or anything, and it's really just because my team members are amazing. They came on board, they love the mission of what we're doing, and we've been really lucky to also connect with so many amazing clients who need support, and they were, like, innovative enough to be like, "I'm okay with trying, like, a new region I've never heard before," and that's how we've grown. So, yeah, yeah, I love that, I am, like, the best success story, of what we're doing.
I love that. I love that. So, I've been on your website. I've done my fair share of internet stalking, but would you mind just for anybody listening, if anybody's interested or anything, like tell me about like the whole mission. Like if somebody was like, "Hey, I've been thinking about it. Like I think you guys have marketing assistants and I've never looked into that before." Like what do they do? What's the play? Like what do they need to know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so if you go to our website, we have so much we have free resources. So there's like a free ebook where if you're like, I don't even know how to hire offshore, like tell me how I would onboard and train them. Like we have a whole ebook that just like lays out the schedule for you. But yeah, so for anybody who's interested, like you could just book a meeting with my team who's in Ethiopia, who's amazing. Like that's also just like you can actually just meet someone and know what they're like. And they'll tell you a little bit about like more about what we do, and we can learn from you. Like, if it is this a good fit, and start to build that relationship with you. And if you're like, yeah, I do need a VA, I do need a cold caller, I do need a developer, then we'll set you up in an interview for you to meet candidates. And then if one of them resonates with you, we help you onboard them, and we meet with you every single week to make sure that things are going well. Because we know like managing people is not easy, and it's helpful to have like an account manager who knows both sides helping you. And yeah, so like that's a good way to get started. Or I'm also on LinkedIn and I share like 3 or 4 times a week, just like tips about how to hire offshore. So even if you have a team in the Philippines or Latin America and you just want more tips on offshoring, yeah, I love to put helpful ideas out there.
I love it. Well, I'm gonna make sure I have your LinkedIn post,
Mhm.
all your links in the show notes of this. But for anybody wondering, the website is CRDLE.com, right? Cradle without an
Mhm.
A.
Cradle without an A, funky spelling. But yeah, that's the website. People can visit at any time.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I know one of our mutual friends uses you and swears by you because he's who introduced us. And so I'm over here like
Yeah.
innately curious. I'm like, I wonder what I'm missing. I'm like, I might have to get a hold of
Yeah.
Valerie and have a conversation
Shout
about
out
this.
he works with Abby, one of our virtual assistants in Ethiopia, and yeah, it's a really fun and he's also a great example, by the way, of, how to hire successfully. Like, he's made her feel part of the team, he meets with her daily, like, he's really he's done everything to make a successful relationship, and it is because of that.
Yeah, and I love it too. And I think before I ask you the last question to land this, I also think it's cool because like your team alone, you have a COO, you
Mhm.
have an operations manager, an account manager, a CMO, a recruitment manager,
Mhm.
right? So like there's probably nothing off limits when it comes to like if you're thinking about this of like, well, could I get support? Does it exist? And I'm
Yeah.
assuming that, it kind of scales as you scale. Like it can start part-time and then it can move into full-time and like as the demands and the needs go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, like, we do I love, like, challenge accepted. Like, if somebody gives us, like, an odd role that we haven't done before because we do get team members with, like, very unique experience. For example, we did an interview today, somebody wanted a customer service rep, but they're in the kind of like the mold space, and so a lot of their clients have medical problems, and we gave them literally a full-on doctor who also has customer service experience, and it was like, well, how else would you find first of all, be able to afford that, but it was also just like this is the exact match of what they needed. So yeah, we love customizing how we can.
Okay, I love this. I love this. So I think at minimum, everybody whoever is thinking about hiring somebody, whether remote or in person, connect with her on LinkedIn
Yeah.
because you'll learn tips and tricks and all of it. And I will personally say that the process of hiring somebody remotely is way harder than hiring somebody in person, like we've talked about. So
Mhm.
anything you will learn there is over applicable to doing it where you are, and it can only
Mhm.
help. And then check out, have a call, have a conversation if it's something you're interested in. So last question, and I'm actually really excited about this one with you. I always use Men in Black as a reference, where people get their memory erased.
Mhm.
I want you to imagine everybody listening to this entire episode forgot everything that we talked about, but they're going to remember what you say right now and they're going to tattoo it on their soul and take it with them forever. It can be life, it can be business, it can be perspective, it can be an Ethiopian proverb. Surprise
Mhm.
us. But if you could give everybody your tattoo wisdom, what would your tattoo wisdom be?
It would be choose Africa. And
Mm,
that is the slogan of our company, but I think it applies. Like, where do you wanna go on vacation this summer? Choose Africa. You need to hire an offshore team? Choose Africa. You're even in Whole Foods and you see all those, lineup of chocolate bars, like, choose Africa. Choose the one that's actually made in Madagascar, that's actually creating jobs on the continent because it tastes better and it creates a better social impact. So, yeah, choose Africa. Like, get the tattoo. Decide that's what I would
do
go
you
with.
have it tattooed?
No, but I kinda want to after this. I
I kind of feel like you just made a public declaration. You're
I
like,
just
get
did
the
it, like, on
tattoo.
my
I'm like,
forearm.
go, girl, go. I'm all in.
I'm
And the one note
I'm
I'll
in.
add to your wisdom is also choose African values and bring more of those
Mm.
into your life. Choose
Mhm.
the lessons at the beginning of this of like going above and beyond, making people feel
Mhm.
seen, like making them feel like a part of the community. Like there's no way to go wrong when you choose to embody and bring those values into your day to day
Mhm.
and everything that you do with your customers, with your clients, with your
Yeah.
colleagues, with your team. And if you go to Carnivore in Nairobi, you need to tell both of us.
You need to tag us on LinkedIn or
Done.
Instagram. Um,
100%, because I
we
cannot
will.
wait to hear and, like, bring a scorecard and write down every exotic game meat that you try. If I remember, it was, like, ostrich, zebra, camel, antelope, like, alligator or
It's
crocodile,
out
plus a few
there.
we won't mention. They're surprises for you when you get there.
Yeah, those are surprises. No, yeah, it's out there. I'm actually vegan, but I'm still as a vegan saying, like, it's worthwhile going because it's crazy experience.
Yeah, see, Africa gets you to eat the meat too. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. And if you're wondering like what it's like, if you've ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse in your life,
Mhm.
times it by 100. It is an experience and it's so
A
good. So
1,000.
like add it to your
Yeah,
roster. Plus, it's like a beautiful country with beautiful people. So
I
Valerie,
know.
thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing, for dropping all the wisdom bombs.
Thank you so much. It was so great. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. So for everybody listening, this has been another one of those episodes that I wouldn't want to become shelf help. So if you've been struggling with burnout, you feel overwhelmed, you don't know where to start with hiring, you've thought about hiring offshore, you're like, oh my God, I could use a virtual assistant, or man, it would be so nice if somebody could edit and post my videos, or reach out and get me on podcasts, or get me keynotes, or any of those things. They
Mhm.
all probably fall into a bucket of something that they help with. But you have to pick up the phone or take the action first because Valerie can't transport her team through the computer to you. But let this be the invitation, right? As Elizabeth Gilbert says, that I now learned and I will read in the book, you have 30 seconds to act. And so if this was the tickle, act on the tickle and at least explore the option because Valerie is a success story and living and embodying that value. And I invite you all to be the same thing. And so we will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we are out.